looking at you, kid.
I'm Charles Foster Kane!
Hey, Stella!
Stuck on this.
What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. It is my great pleasure today to welcome back David Lambert for discussion about Horizon and American Saga Part 1. Mr. Lambert is easily the biggest Western fanatic that I've ever met, and some of my favorite podcasts that I've ever produced have been those where we tackle classic Westerns like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, The Wild Bunch, Shane, and The Searchers, and I'll leave a link to some of those episodes down in the description below. But also, quick heads up, David and I will be reuniting to discuss the new Blu-ray Criterion release for Pat Garrett and Bill the Kid once that edition has arrived in our inboxes. In any event, the topic at hand today is Horizon, so enough bullshitting on my part. Let's start with the basics. Who is David Lambert, and what have you been working on lately? And as you answer, I will pour myself a little whiskey, because I can see that you're already imbibing on your end. I'm not going to make you drink alone.
Oh, okay. I'm David Lambert. I mean, most relevant to, I guess, this podcast right now would be my Twitter, which is David Lambert Art, and I basically just post almost exclusively about the Old West history, Western movies, the Western and pop culture, you know. So yeah, if you're interested in Westerns, Old West history, anything like that, I think you might like it.
Very cool. And remind everybody where they can find the episode you recently recorded with Christopher Funderburg and John Cribbs.
Oh yes, the Pink Smoke podcast. Yeah, we did an episode about cattle drive westerns, so stuff like Red River, Culpeper Cattle Company, Lonesome Dove, and then some obscurities here and there, going back to the silent era. And
I
that
have
is
to interrupt you. Your fan
What?
is going inside your T-shirt, and it makes it look like you have an alien, like xenomorph, about to rip out of your chest. It's like it's rippling along. Like any second, I've been expecting just a chest burster just to erupt in all directions. But
okay, so
it provides
sorry.
additional visual stimulation. No worries. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay. That's if you have 4 hours of free time. Do you think this one's gonna get flagged too?
Yeah, for your chest ripples.
For my bountiful. But yeah, if you have 4 hours of free time, check it out. It's Pink Smoke Podcast. It's a very long conversation, pretty exhaustive stuff. But if you like westerns, I think you'll enjoy it.
So who did Cribbs and Funderburg kidnap or threaten to kill to finally get you to discuss Red River on a podcast? I was begging and pleading for years, and you always shot me down. And then I saw you tackled it on another show. I was wounded all the way deep down.
You kind of moved away from the a lot of the classic stuff like that. So I had to take my idea for a cattle drive western podcast. I had to take it somewhere, but we didn't. Even though we did talk about Red River a decent amount, I still make a more exhaustive podcast in me, probably.
Very cool.
So
at some point we will definitely have to give it the appropriate attention that it deserves. But as much as I would love to talk about nothing but Red River today, we've got a different Western on the agenda. So I've already had a chance to share my thoughts yesterday with my initial review. Today's going to be more about picking your brain and your thoughts. So just give me like the basics. What'd you think? Just the lowdown, like the good, the bad, everything in between. Just the floor is yours. What'd you think of Horizon?
What did I think? Overall, I was not a fan. There are a lot of great moments in it, which we can get into, but yeah, but there are a lot of problems. It's interesting. What kind of struck me is that Kevin Costner talks about how he was inspired by How the West Was Won, and we can get into that in a little bit. But the whole feel of it and the aesthetic, outside of its insane structure, being released in these chapters, is a 90s Western. It feels so much like a 90s Western, just with like digital cinematography. Just everything about it, the classy nude bathing scene, even when that, everything about it is straight up it felt like a 90s Western. For better or worse, there are good things about that, maybe, but overall, maybe not the best time to harken back to it.
In the early 90s, I really enjoyed early 90s Westerns, but I had not yet discovered a lot of the Westerns from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s that I came to love and revere in so many ways. And then when you go back and revisit 90s Westerns, you're like, oh, okay, let me just, tap the brakes on some of my effusive praise and that sort of thing. But I totally agree. It's almost like he said, you know what? I fucking won 7 Oscars back in 1991 for Dances with Wolves. I'm just going to go after that 90s aesthetic. However, I was rewatching some clips from Dances with Wolves last night. Dances with Wolves at least feels like a big, bold, epic movie. Do I think it should have won all those Oscars instead of Goodfellas? Nope. But it has scenes that feel inherently cinematic, like the buffalo hunt, or at the very end of the movie when his friend is saying goodbye to him up on the hill. Like it feels like a movie. This, for me, as I said in my review, felt like a pitch for a TV show, which kind of got repurposed for the cinema. And I feel like, for me, cinema is inherently driven by visual storytelling. TV, there's a reason why in TV, the writer-producer has all the power. And there's a reason why in movies, the director has all the power. The director's good at creating visuals. The writer-producer is good at crafting ongoing storylines. And it just, as I was watching, I was like, I feel like I'm watching TV just with other people, like with total strangers at my local cinema.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem with it, we can get into all my nitpicks, but the biggest problem with it is this structure, is this commitment to trying to tell all these different stories, that he's trying to kind of mimic how the West Was Won, and that's a movie that a lot of Western fans don't like because it's so bombastic and kind of silly and nerd and. In many ways, I enjoy it. I don't think it's a great Western, but I enjoy it for what it is. But the problems with that movie is that it's instead of being one whole satisfying Western story, it's like a bunch of small, unsatisfying ones.
Is that the one that has the scene you're always sharing when it's like bearing children for you would be just as easy as falling off a log? Is that,
yes, yeah.
I love those stills and her reaction, but the only scene that I remember from How the West Was Won was the segment directed by John Ford, where you have Sherman and Grant having a conversation on people's lack of confidence in them. And I don't even really remember liking that scene that much. It felt like, tier 2 John Ford.
That's one of the weaker scenes. I mean, the best scene in that is I think Henry Hathaway directed it. It's the train robbery scene with Eli Wallach as the bad guy, and him doing these finger guns to these kids is why he was cast in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He thought it was for The Magnificent Seven, but it was actually How the West Was Won. So, and the problem with that movie is that it's all these characters, and you don't ever get to actually follow, anyone fully. So it's like trying to be the entire family as opposed to any character, and you don't ever really get to know anyone that well. That's a bad place to start from. And Costner is still doesn't even do that one. He hasn't even finished his story, but there's so many different characters that don't make any kind of impression at all. So much of it is following kids, like who it not only, and look it, I'm on Costner's side. I don't want to come out like super negative. I don't like to be negative. I'm rooting for this movie. I'll see the next one. I don't feel like a duty to see it because I need to keep the Western genre alive or whatever. But there was enough about this movie that I did like that I'm interested enough to see the next one. But
yeah, I'm right there with you where I'm rooting for him. I want him to be successful. I respect the fact that it's an independent production. I respect the fact that he's putting in so much of his own money and putting his own reputation and his career on the line. But that doesn't mean I have to like the finished product. Like, I can respect his goals while at the same time being critical of the film. And I think sometimes people get confused about, are you in the, like, do you work in publicity or do you work in film commentary? And for me, I'm trying to provide commentary, even if I find the behind the scenes fascinating. And I really do sincerely hope that he'll get a chance to finish the entire quartet. I would be just gobsmacked if these movies are successful enough where he's able to do so. But who knows? I mean, the guy, he's been making movies for over 40 years. He might end up having the last laugh over all of us. But right now, I'm very skeptical that we will see the fourth film in the planned series.
My guess is that whatever he's doing with this third one is going to be used as a wrap up for the second one. I don't know how it's doing. I haven't looked. I don't see a world where this, I don't know. But so not only is he doing that and bankrolling all that and everything, everyone kind of knows that story. We don't need to get too much into that. But he's also decided, I'm going to focus on a bunch of child actors throughout this thing too. And it's a mistake. I honestly don't care about almost any story in this until we get to Kevin Costner about an hour in.
Yeah.
And that section, which is not like anything amazing or whatever, but it's like, why am I not just watching this movie, Costner as the stoic gunfighter up against this family, or, I mean, that's what I want to see. He's doing all these other things about like, a wagon train section here, and this section about Manifest Destiny, and then he wants to try to give the natives equal time, but then it's just the same stuff. The wise elder, the young hothead. It's just the same cliche. So he's not actually exploring this stuff in any kind of original way. So it's like, I don't know why he. I mean, and Dances with Wolves is not a movie I particularly love, but if you look, I mean, it's just this feels so much smaller, even though it's a bigger canvas. But just the portrayal of the tribes, they seem they're just kind of like in a ravine with a couple huts or whatever, just sort of sitting around. So it's not explored in any kind of way. And we can get into other nitpicks, but I just mean structurally. And it's like, yeah, if you want to tell this big, wider story, and we can get into our nitpicks in each of those, but you need to have something to wrap up the first part if you know it's going to be this big. You cannot just show me an extended trailer.
All right, so we should offer a spoiler warning.
And sorry.
Yeah, if you have not seen the movie, go watch it. But
yeah.
Once again, last spoiler warning. I thought the most frustrating part of the movie by far was how it doesn't have an ending at all. It doesn't even like go into credits and like have like a post-credit stinger say, like, tune in August for the next installment or the next chapter in this grand sweeping saga. It just kind of starts going into this highlight reel of things to come. And I was like, oh, so y'all aren't even going to give us an ending of any kind. You're just going to press pause and give us like a deep tease for something coming in 6 weeks. I found that ending to be intensely unsatisfying. And when the beginning of the movie didn't even feel like a beginning, it just felt like they were kind of almost like backing into the story when it should have started an hour in with Kevin Costner and that big heroic ride. And speaking of which, I have a little clip from the trailer, which I'm going to share right now, which is the exact shot in question.
I'm from here. I will tell you this. In these territories, men will come try you. They will take from you until you are wiped clean from this land.
You think?
And I apologize. I screwed up. I deliberately cut the first like 2 or 3 seconds off to make the shot short enough so I wouldn't get flagged for copyright. So you just have to imagine the big heroic shot of Kevin Costner riding into frame, as we all saw in the trailer, over and over and over again. But I completely agree about how it's trying to do so many things at once that it doesn't really successfully do any of them all that well. It wants to tell us over several years, kind of right leading into the American Civil War, during the American Civil War, and right after, the changing face of the frontier from the perspective of the Apache, from the cattle drive, from horse traders, from people trying to settle this town of Horizon. Like, all roads are leading to this town of Horizon. But it's like the movie spends so much time setting up all these characters and so much time trying to show how their destinies are all going to basically intersect in this town. My most lingering impression at the end of the movie was it hasn't even gotten started yet. Like, The Godfather told its whole story in 2 hours and 50 minutes. I'm sorry, if you have three, everyone keeps saying, like, stop being so harsh. This is just an intro. We got 3 more chapters. Like, but movies do need to be successful, and movies do need to sell tickets in order to have all this downstream, revenue sources like digital and whatnot pay off as well. You will not get to chapters 3 and 4 unless these movies work. And for a movie to work, it has to be a satisfying story unto itself. And I feel like that's where the movie failed. Like, I love the actors. I love the ambition. I love the boldness of the whole experiment, but just as a standalone 3-hour epic Western movie, and a movie does not have to be 3 hours to feel epic. Last of the Mohicans, which is not a Western, but it's at least colonial, that's barely 2 hours long, and it feels epic as fuck. So I don't need to see 3 hours of filler just to kind of get the story underway. And I think a lot of people are going to feel frustrated, even if they are rooting for Kevin Costner all the way and have been enjoying his movies for decades.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's like you don't get points for just like I said before. It's like, okay, so you just, instead of giving me one well-told West story, you're giving me 3 or 4 undeveloped, poorly told ones that are just mashed together that aren't doing anything new, And it's like, okay, did want to sort of touch upon the wagon train stuff, or the more of the Western experience with the Apaches and all that stuff. Do it in a way where you're following his character, and when he has to go on the run with the girl, right? Have him hide out in a wagon train. Now you can tell, you could, have it be follow these characters having to hide out from these other guys or some. I'm not trying to. I don't want to rewrite the movie here, But it's like that's what you want to see. That's what you want to see. You don't want to see just all these kind of non-entity actors. You're not interested. They're not interesting characters. They're not interesting people. So I don't care about Sam Worthington. You know what I mean? Then you put Michael.
He's in love.
Any of that stuff with I don't know if we should break down the scenes. I don't know if I'm just getting ahead of myself, and I'm probably coming out too negative right here.
No worries. But what you are doing, you already hit the nail on the head, because one of my questions was going to be later in the episode, like, let's put on our screenwriter hats for a moment. Because for me, the biggest problem was a reluctance to make disciplined writing choices. And I feel like when you're writing a book or a screenplay or a movie or a show, you have to be disciplined. You can't do everything that's in your head. You got to really zero in on what's most important. And my fix for the movie, and I wanted to get your read on whether or not you think this would work or not. If they had just focused on Kevin Costner's character the entire movie, everything from his point of view, but along the way, he meets the Apache, he meets the wagon train, he meets the people from Horizon, he meets everybody. And so we still get all those characters, we still get all those storylines, but we're getting it exclusively from his point of view. And that way you get one standalone story, big giant movie stars made 1 million movies that people know and love. And I feel like that would have felt like a complete story. And then in the follow-up movie, then you could continue to develop all those characters.
Yeah. And I mean, this is maybe an unfair comparison, but it is a similar sort of thing where it's trying to follow a town or the development of a town or something to that effect. I think we'll see what happens in the next one. And maybe we're being unfair now, but am I going to get a voucher for the next one? I'm still paying. Well, I got movie pass, but still. But you know what I mean? So it's like whatever flaws are in this one, I can't see into the future and go, that's going to work. And I imagine a lot of the flaws that I see in this one are going to be carried over to that one. We can get into that. But a movie that tells its story in 2 hours, and it's about a town, and I just showed it to my girlfriend because she's never seen it. McCabe and Mrs. Miller. Like I said, it might be an unfair comparison, but you see a town develop, you follow it through basically one character, but you have a whole community there of memorable little side characters. It doesn't have to go that far. I'm not expecting Costner to become Robert Altman, but that is a through line that's about the development of a town, and you could still tell your wagon train story, or you can still tell your Apache story or whatever. I mean, I know he's trying to do, trying to give equal time, but the stuff with the Apache is just so half baked. It's so not interesting, and it's like, it's like I get it, you're doing it in terms of fairness, and then he tries to represent, also like the Chinese, and then it's like, but all it is like, hey, here's a baby, watch this baby now. Here's some China. It's like, if you wanted to maybe update how the West was won, right? If that is your goal, then why don't you do it from a Chinese experience? You know what I mean? Don't just like, oh, we'll put a black guy in the beginning and then that's representation. It's like, you know what I mean? I'm not saying it has to be completely multicultural or whatever, but it's like, it's like, if you're actually trying to update that story or tell it in a more honest way, to do that, but don't just tell a story about a bunch of white people, throw in a cliched plot about, natives that is the same archetypes that we've seen since the silent era, with no development. It's just, anyway, I'm being too negative about this movie.
No, we'll get to the positives in a sec, but I have a theory. I think they wrote this decades ago, felt like they had it, and they've never looked back on it, never revised it. And as you mentioned at the beginning, it does feel like a throwback to the early 90s. But the Western genre, was so cool about it is how it's developed in so many different surprising ways over the last 100 years, depending upon who's making it, when they're making it, what their goals are. And it just felt like a really strange time capsule from a different era. And I just feel like no era of filmmaking ever comes again. You can't make movies like it's the 1940s. You can't make movies like it's the 1970s. You got to make movies like it's 2024. And I feel like a recent movie that you and I discussed was the assassination of Jesse James. Like that felt like a modern Western that was like boldly plowing forward into new stylistic terrain in ways that we'd never seen before. Or the show Deadwood felt like it was doing something that we'd never seen before. There wasn't a single moment in all of this where I wasn't like, oh, this kind of feels like Kevin Costner and Walter Hill and Sam Raimi and Clint Eastwood and everybody just kind of like stirred together all the best ingredients of early 90s Westerns, and poof, this movie was born. It just felt in a lot of ways very much locked in amber. But if we are going to try to get positive, I mean, I've said I really like some of the cast that he assembled, not necessarily their dialogue or their storylines. I just like these actors. But what for you was the best part? Because for me, the storyline between Abby Lee and Kevin Costner is the best. But maybe I just have a little bit of an unwholesome crush on Abby Lee going back to Mad Max Fury Road. She's a super hot Australian supermodel. But what for you really worked about the movie?
I mean, the stuff that worked for me is that same section. That's the movie that I wanted to see. I like you. I liked some of the casting. I like that family of villains. They look like they sort of stepped out of the Great Silence. The big tall dude. I haven't done any research and looked up any names, so I'm going to be saying the tall dude and this guy.
Yeah, but kind of the patriarch, the abusive older brother is tough as nails and really cool.
Yeah, that stuff's great. Their mother, the matriarch of that family. I know I've seen an actress somewhere and I can't remember where, It just
She's
looks
got,
great.
yeah, shit kicker tattooed on her forehead, but she's fantastic. She does exactly what she's supposed to do in the movie.
Yeah, and I'm just like Kevin, why didn't you just make a small western in this little this little crusty town that looks like, it reminds me of kind of like the Westerner, the Weiler movie, the Judge Roy Bean one, and just tell whatever gritty gunfighting story. We just want to see you do gunfighting shit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want every western to be that way, but it's like this he just has this lofty canvas that he wants to paint, and he's not a good enough painter. It's unfortunate. He should have just focused on this, and then if it did well, continue your story. Tell your big story about the West if that's really what you want to do. You know what I mean? Make a small one that we want to see. And that sequence is great when the guy keeps talking to him as he's walking up the hill and everything. That's a great scene.
Yeah.
That's what you want to see. And then when the shooting happens, it's, you know, digital squibs and stuff, but whatever. But the sound and everything, it's like open range, and the best stuff in open range is the gunfighting stuff, you know. And it's like, that's the movie that we want to see, him against these guys. I don't care about Sienna Miller. I don't care about the dog. I don't care about these characters. I don't care about the son that joins these scalp hunters. They're not interesting people in any capacity. And so it's like, why are you forcing me to watch this? You know, and there's certain scenes where I just had to look. I wanted to look away because I want to like the movie.
Yeah. But there's some really hollow scenes where across the 3 hours, there are different points where it's trying to, like, it's visibly straining to reach those emotional crescendos where you'll feel chills or goosebumps or emotion, like when a bunch of cavalry officers are traveling east to fight in the Civil War, and Sienna Miller's daughter is, like, you know, giving him like a tearful farewell. I'm like, I don't even know who these characters are or what they've done to form this bond. This moment is completely empty. It just feels like a facsimile of what's supposed to be a really powerful emotional scene, but they haven't laid the groundwork or done any of the work to get to that point.
Yeah, and not only that, I guess we're going back to the complaints, but
That's the blues talking.
But the score is so not only generic, but so overbearing, and it's trying to do so much heavy lifting, and it almost feels like they knew they had to tell a lot of these stories in a truncated manner, and they're like, let's have the music really push this. And there's scenes that maybe wouldn't have been like amazing scenes, but without the music might have worked in some capacity. You know, he does stuff that's so emotionally manipulative, where there's this mother holding her dead child, you know, and saying, you know, you can't go until I let you go or whatever. And it's so, you know, it's an act of emotional terrorism, but it's fine. That's fine. Whatever. That's the thing. But putting the music under it, it just takes it all power. It just becomes absurd, you know, because we don't know these people, you know.
I feel like Samuel Fuller was a director who really understood how to use music to amplify the drama. Like we talked about 40 Guns, which is a Western that's absolutely wild. And the music's really intense and operatic and just like it's in your face the entire time. But he's already done the groundwork with the characters and the script. And so it's there as like a deal sweetener. It's not there as a substitute for great writing and great acting. I feel like the music needs to amplify what's already there. It can't do the work for you because you forgot to do it in advance.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Jenna Malone's character with her new husband, and she stops and is telling him how he's been such a good man and everything. And so you already know, okay, this guy's fucking dead, whatever. But and it's a little too expository and everything, but it's like, okay, fine. But once again, putting the music over just makes it like absurd. You're like, we don't know these people. You know, you're just telling us, and you're making us like you already know what's gonna happen here. So it's just like he's trying to telegraph this work that he should be doing. Well, he's trying to telegraph the work that he can't do because he's trying to tell too many stories. you know?
I really felt that like in the first 30, 40 minutes where the movie, it can't even really get started because it's introducing so many characters in so many different locations. And it'll say like, Missouri, not Missouri, like, Montana or whatever. Like it lets you kind of vaguely know, but the audience needs to have an idea of like, what is the movie about? And maybe like a title card could have been like at the beginning, like during the time of the Great Westward Push, like there were some towns that came and go. Like this is a story about one of those towns, just kind of set the stage. But initially, like I felt like I couldn't even really get on firm footing because the trailer never gave me any idea of what the actual like synopsis or overall story would be. So I kept looking for clues. I was like, what is this story going to finally settle on? And about like maybe an hour in, I was like, okay, everybody's more or less is heading toward Horizon, but I had to kind of fill that in for myself. And I guess you could make a case that not every show or movie should do as much hand holding as some of them do. But I feel like a lot of people are going to feel like they're in quicksand, not even really knowing how to kind of get a toehold where they can feel invested in the story.
Yeah. You're never invested. It just so much. These characters get introduced so quickly, and then you're just suddenly like, oh, there's an extra kid. Oh yeah, of course, yeah. And then I'm like, wait, is Jenna Malone, was she sleeping with one of their brothers, or is she related to? I was not even sure exactly. She shot some guy, and I guess that was one of their brothers, right? Or she was the mistress,
or
right?
Their father. I'm assuming at the very beginning,
father,
she shot
right?
the father of the kind of redneck chick.
Okay, right. Yeah. See, so then it was like, at first I was like, okay, but she's the mistress, and then it was the father. I was confused. And look, I was high when I saw the movie. Let's be fair. So take all this with a grain of salt. But
I was sober as a judge, and I was still looking for answers.
Yeah. And so, and that's the story I want to see developed. It's like you're allowed to just tell a simple Western story. He doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. He's not trying to reinvent the wheel. He's just trying to repeat it, right? He's just basically
like Open Range has much less ambition, but it's much more satisfying. You get great chemistry between Robert Duvall and Kevin Costner. You have simple motivation. These guys have been screwed over by the greedy local cattle baron who's coming after their herd, and they need to get revenge. They need to get payback. And it's just a neat and tidy, concise little genre film that 20 years later, people still love and talk about affectionately. And I've got some issues with Open Range as well, but there's enough there that works really, really well that ultimately it leaves a very favorable impression on the viewer. I think Open Range is vastly superior to Horizon.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I don't love Open Range, but like you said, it's a nice, solid little Western. I think it was, I wish it was maybe smaller. I think it's just not enough really happens in it for me. But it's still like, it's still telling a smaller story. And the same thing with Dances as well. It's telling a smaller story in more detail. And that's a better way of doing things. But yeah, there's nothing wrong. Like, I guess he thought this was important. He really had something to say here, but it's like, I just would rather just see him, just a Kevin Costner, simple gunfighting Western with these villains. I mean, the problem with Open Range is that it has bad villains. They're so over the top, but
good
they're not
actors, but bad villains. Like Michael Gambon is a world-class actor, but he's horrendous in Open Range. He's terrible as the main villain, but we all know that he can be fucking astonishing under the right circumstances, like the singing detective.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, you can have like one-dimensional villains, but they have to be scary, and you can have kind of super like threat. Like, they don't have to be the most imposing villains, but in that case, they need to be somewhat three-dimensional or interesting. Open Range just has really non-scary villains that are just so over the top and silly that they're not a threat and they're not interesting. and yeah, so but this one has better villains. They're a little over the top maybe, but I enjoyed them, and that's the movie that I want to watch. The stuff with Sienna Miller, the Apache attack and everything. Once again, the music, we don't need it to be that that crazy, and it's really not that impressive of a sequence that I thought. You know, I mean, I think that the gunfight at the end of Open Range is a great piece of action filmmaking. Some of it's silly, but really good. And he shows a little bit of that in the gunfight with the one guy. But all the other stuff with like the Apache attacks and stuff, I wasn't impressed by them. Sienna Miller looks, all the women in this, and look at, I'm not going to get to history stuff and about the costumes and things. There's some really bad
That's going to
ones.
be one of my questions. So yeah, that's
Okay,
why you're here,
okay.
for the historical inaccuracies.
Okay. Well, we'll get into some of the other ones, but every woman in this movie looks absurd. And I'm not, and it doesn't have to be like they have to have every button correct or whatever. They just look so, Sienna Miller looks like, it doesn't even look like a 90s like Western movie. It looks like Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. Like, so not, and this is always an issue with Westerns, even classic Westerns and everything. But it feels like, come on, Costner, you should know better. Even in the among the Apaches, he has this supermodel with just perfectly plucked eyebrows, and
she was so sexy that I didn't object. I was like, at least this is giving me something to get interested in. This astonishingly hot Apache woman, even if she definitely looked like she just stepped off of like a runway with a bunch of other models, as opposed to living in squalor out in the middle of nowhere.
Every woman in this movie looks like that, and it's like, and it's like, and hey, look at, I mean, that's like, hey, look at, I love beautiful women and everything, that's fine. But you know, movies more recently usually try to kind of do sort of period, sort of vaguely period correct hotness, like how hot could we make someone from the period look? This just doesn't care. I mean, what's the actress's name? What is it? Abby Lee? Is that what you said? Was that her name?
The one who plays the working girl who takes an interest in Costner.
She has purple lipstick to match her corset. I mean, it's absurd. She looks like steampunk. The women just look not even like, just even, they would be absurd in even a 90s Western. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's definitely Costner. It's definitely Costner, horny dad, you know, classy sex scene where, you know, of course, Abby Miller has to have sex with Kevin Costner while I don't really want you to. I'm tired. Oh boy. And it's just like, okay, dude. All right. It's so horny dad. And it's like, that's fine. Make your TNT afternoon dad, Louis L'Amour, Tom Selleck, you know, TV movie Western, which is kind of the aesthetic of this in a lot of ways too. But it's like, just do it. Do that simple, you know, do the simple, efficient Bud Bedecker version of that 90s movie. You're not Cecil DeMille, or, you know, you're not James Cruz. Everyone's going to get that reference. But here's
my theory is that for years, while he's been working on Yellowstone and that show's been enjoying insane levels of success, and the writer of the show, you know, he's spawned a TV empire with multiple shows where, like, you know, but like the hub of the wheel is the success of Yellowstone, which has allowed him to do Tulsa King in, like, you know, 1883 and 1923 and all these other spinoffs and that sort of thing. And I think Kevin Costner, and this is one thing, totally a theory, I haven't seen him say anything along these lines, I suspect he's been kind of bristling under like the leadership of another filmmaker. It's like, I'm the Oscar-winning director, I should have my own empire. And so he basically dusted off this old idea, I can create my own empire from this 4-part series called Horizon. And I'll even use some actors from Yellowstone, like Danny Houston. He's a really good part of some of the early seasons of Yellowstone. And I think Danny Houston, I'm very biased towards Danny Houston because I love John Huston so much. I get like a bleed over effect into all of his children and family members. But I feel like he's trying to replicate the success of Yellowstone in the context of a movie empire. But it's like, he doesn't quite know what he wants the story. Does he want to make an epic movie, or does he want to make the world's greatest TV series? And I really feel like this would have been better served, spend the exact same amount of money, but turn it into a very glossy, respectable miniseries for AMC or for Hulu or for HBO or whomever, because every step of the way it looked and felt and sounded like a TV show. It never opened up. Like, it never really got the camera movement and moving. And I feel like when you watch the buffalo hunt scene from Dances with Wolves, even if that movie's, I don't rank it as high as like some of like the great classic Westerns, but at least the camera's moving, the photography is beautiful. He opens it up and it feels cinematic. And this movie, I feel like, fails in that primary duty of ever just becoming cinematic.
Yeah, well, like a lot of people have said, that same kind of point about that it should have been a TV series, and maybe I don't think it should have been. I don't think he has a story. I think he's just trying. I mean, we'll see where it goes. Maybe the second one, and then the third, and then the fourth. That's where it's going to make sense.
My understanding is that he's shooting the third right now, but he needs more money to finish it. Like, he, famously at the recent Cannes Film Festival, he said he was going from yacht to yacht, knocking on yachts, trying to talk to billionaires for money. He has some mystery investor who put in about 50, and he's an investor who's gone unnamed and no one knows who he is. They alluded to him on the most recent episode of The Town about how did this deal come together, because if you're making an independent film for more than $100 million, the deals get incredibly complicated. But there's some mysterious benefactor. I don't know if he's worth many billions or hundreds of millions or under 100 million. I don't know what's his tap out point, but maybe he's basically told Kevin Costner, do the best you can, and when you run out of money, come talk to me and I'll give you another 50 or whatever the case might be. But I really have no idea if the third one will even get finished. I think he was banking on this one doing pretty well so that he could rope in additional investors for the third. But once again, I have nothing but the utmost respect for just his guts and his stick-to-itiveness, just like being willing to endure the hell and misery of all these productions. But I guess it's all serving as his vanity and his ego. So maybe it's just an absolute blast every step of the way. Who knows?
I don't know, and I don't know if I had to bet on it, I would imagine he's going to use whatever's in that one and try to do some kind of ending in this second one, since it's already been shot, to try to wrap it up. But maybe he's just going to keep going. That's okay. That's fine. But I honestly just don't think he had much to say in the other stories. Or at least he hasn't said it yet. So I don't know if a TV show is actually what it needed. I think it really just needed to be just a smaller Western. He needed to focus on one story, and it could still be a sort of a bunch of different character actors coming in and out. And that's the other thing too. It's like, so he cast and then has him play Irish. Then he has Sam Worthington, who cannot do an American accent, and he's got them talking to each other. It's like, what the hell are you doing? Why is Michael Rooker Irish? What are you doing? Like, what is this?
Less than no sense. Michael Rooker, he's been so exposed lately in so many movies, like the Guardians of the Galaxy series and that sort of thing. Everybody knows Michael Rooker. Everybody loves Michael Rooker. He's been doing amazing work ever since Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, and Mississippi Burning and all that stuff. Everyone knows exactly how he sounds, exactly how he talks. And he's one of the only actors in the movie that could bring some of that rustic kind of hillbilly integrity to his role. And they immediately rob him of one of his greatest gifts, the ways that he expresses himself verbally. And so that was a total mystery to me as to why they turned him into an Irishman. Just hire a fucking Irish actor. There are a bunch of them out there that are a goddamn genius.
There was no reason the character had to be Irish. You know what I mean? Just like, at first I was like, is he doing an Irish accent? No, he's not. No, he is. I was like, what? Why? And all that stuff. And it's also like, we're supposed to, I guess, feel devastated for Sienna Miller, her daughter, and everything, but they don't look, you don't ever see it on their faces. They don't look devastated. So you're just seeing them kind of hang around this fort with the cavalry. And then it's like, oh, here's a subplot. They're trying to get the furniture out for them so they can sleep on a bed. Who cares? It's not interesting. He thinks he's doing some kind of John Ford side character stuff, like you said, with these two characters going off in the Civil War. He's not. We're not. These guys aren't registering. None of this is interesting or funny or fun. You're not John Ford, Kevin Costner. That's okay, but know your strengths. You can't just do an inferior version of it and then
think we're good. John Ford John Ford could not star in No Way Out. John Ford could not star in The Untouchables. John Ford could not star in JFK. Like, John Ford had different strengths and different qualities as a filmmaker. And Kevin Costner can't be John Ford. He cannot make the Cavalry trilogy. He cannot make Ford. But it feels like he saw Fort Apache and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon a long time ago and kind of remembered them and wanted to inject some of those qualities into the movie. But I can just go back and watch She Wore a Yellow Ribbon and Fort Apache and have a lot more fun. I think those movies are much more entertaining.
Yeah, yeah. So then it's just like, I wish he was the villain in this little side movie where Costner's fighting the guys from The Great Silence, or whatever that's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But
right, well, historically, you've taken a great interest in gun manufacture and which guns are period accurate, and which ones are not, which ones are there for show, and which ones are there because they ought to be. Did anything jump? Because I am a blank slate when it comes to authenticity in terms of on-screen firearms and when the repeating rifle was invented and all that stuff. Did anything jump out at you when it came to the weapons of the movie that seemed really, really good or really, really awful?
Yeah, they're wrong. All the guns are the models, I think, are generally correct, but they're all cartridge conversions, so they accept cartridges. That's something that came after the Civil War.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so they definitely wouldn't be having cartridge belts, and they wouldn't be putting cartridges in their guns. Costumes are all, I mean, it's fine. It looks like a Western. It's fine. For a historical epic, if people are interested in history, the costumes are wrong. All the hats are post-Civil War cowboy hats. Some of them are just way bad. And there's one guy in particular wearing this long leather duster with fringe. I don't know if anyone else noticed him. He's one of the bad guys. And it's so absurd. No one in the Old West wore anything like that. That wouldn't even be correct for the bike riders. That's not correct for the 1960s, let alone the 1860s. So yeah, costumes are very bad. But hey, that's okay. It's not going to get extra. I mean, well, maybe we'll get extra points for having better costumes, but it doesn't get deducted. Yeah, if the movie works, it works. That stuff is not that important. But since this is hefty sort of ideas about being sort of this big, epic history of the West sort of thing, that stuff is definitely not correct.
Apart from How the West Was Won, can you think of any movie that's been successful at trying to capture such a big topic? Because I think this is a classic example of someone's reach exceeding their grasp. But when you look at the big, expensive Westerns of the past, movies like Heaven's Gate, even Heaven's Gate wasn't trying to capture the enormity of the entire Western experience. It was very location specific, and I was trying to capture a very specific moment in history. But in capturing that moment to the degree that it does, it almost becomes like a stand-in for, like, I guess, a much larger canvas. Like, I don't think you need to depict the entire West to make a movie feel like the entire West. But if you capture one area or one story really, really well, then you can kind of imagine the rest of the West outside the frame.
Yeah, you're always biting off more than you can chew. The times it's usually, they usually focus. Yeah, like you said, I don't think there's a ton of anthology stuff. I mean, Costner himself did, like, in many ways, Wyatt Earp is sort of in an attempt. Obviously, that's Lawrence Kasdan, but Costner was, very creatively involved in that. But that is also sort of, they try to kind of follow certain famous aspects of the West. It starts when he's trying to run off for the Civil War, and then you have him as a buffalo hunter and a lawman, and and then later he's got prospecting at the end and everything. So it kind of tries to tell a similar thing that we were talking about, but once again, that's a movie that is also full of great moments and scenes. And don't get me wrong, this movie has a lot of great moments and scenes in it. I'm not
All right, so give me your
like
3 favorite scenes just off the top of your head. Like, what are the scenes where you would show to somebody that loves Westerns to make a case for why they should get their butt off the couch and go to the theater and put down money? Because in 2024, when the Western is not necessarily as popular as the superhero genre, although once upon a time it was, and it's really struggling internationally to be relevant and popular. But what are the scenes that you would say it justifies the time and the expense? Because by the time you go to the theater, sit through an hour of fucking commercials and trailers, and then watch the movie and get home, you're going to lose about 5 or 6 hours of your day all in. And so it is, I think, a tough sell for the casual fan. But which scenes make the case?
oh man, that's right. Wow, that's a lot.
Now we are in the publicity arm of Warner Brothers,
Yeah,
and we're working
yeah.
for Kevin Costner.
I mean, I enjoyed most of the scenes with the villains. I enjoyed the scenes with Costner. I enjoyed that section. And the other parts is really not much. I mean, I don't I don't
Like Will Patton, I feel like was totally wasted on this. Like you could have cut out the entire cattle drive and saved it for the second movie if it's really that important, and it would not have negatively impacted the movie at all. Like the little side plot with the British, artists that don't understand that they are, squandering water or failing to help out. I thought all those little scenes were just filler at best. And Luke Wilson, who does have a legitimate Texan accent, like I feel like Luke Wilson should be in the movie. He should have just been another cavalry officer at the base serving Danny Houston. Just take that actor and plop him down the other scene and cut out the cattle drive entirely. It's not even cattle drive. It's a wagon train. Sorry, I keep saying cattle drive. I've got Lonesome Dove on the brain because Lonesome Dove for me is one of the movies where it's just a cattle drive, but due to all the characters and adventures they have along the way, it ends up capturing the entire kind of spirit of like the Western genre. And I feel like that's another example where a simple story, very well told, ends up capturing the flavor of the West, as opposed to a movie that's trying to do too many things at once, but none of them particularly well.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily cut out the wagon train stuff. I mean, I'd cut out like I wouldn't necessarily cut out that plot. Maybe not as it exists in the film, but like I said before, I would have thought, because they have a whole section where Costner goes on the run with the prostitute, right, and the kid. It just seems so organic to the story to have them get on the cattle drive, and then have the
now you're saying cattle drive instead of wagon train. I've
on a cattle drive wagon train. Yeah, okay. I'll get it with the wagon train. Let the cavalry just sort of be a periphery thing. We don't need that. Look at it. Obviously I love westerns. And I love all kinds of westerns. Cavalry westerns. There's masterpieces there. Some of John Ford's best movies. Fort Apache is one of his best movies. It's one of the best westerns ever made. But overall, it's like, it's not my favorite. It doesn't have the stuff I truly, really love about westerns. It's always so sort of regressive, and it's not a bunch of guys in blue suits. It's not that interesting to me. And it's they're obviously still westerns, but it's like Western war movie. It's it's like Western adjacent, and it's like that's not stuff that I'm not as interested in. That's my own prejudice, but he didn't do anything to convince me, someone who loves westerns, that this is an interesting story. So somebody who doesn't, I don't see how they would, if you've lost me. But anyway, so I honestly think that that is the logical starting point of this movie, and so cut out all that stuff, and you could tell your wagon train story. I don't know where that's going to go. Maybe it'll be interesting. Right now, it's not that interesting that there are people being lazy and then they're getting mad at them. That's not great. And also, another complaint, outside of some of the, Will Patton and Michael Rooker and Costner himself and the big tall dude and some of the villain guys and that lady and everything. A lot of bad small parts. The store owner, the chubby guy with the glasses, he's so over the top, like real bad, like from another era of like comedy. These little small characters, and all the kids look like child actors. You know, it's nobody. There's very few people that look like they really have grit.
Basically, it had
the
you
movie.
calling bullshit on too many of the
Yes,
characters.
yes, bullshit. So anyway, I'm being nitpicky here and everything, but
All right, let's take a break. We're gonna play a quick
okay.
little game
Okay.
called Better Than, Worse Than, and I've got a few clips of from Kevin Costner's history within the Western genre prepared, and all I just want you to chime in on, is Horizon better than or worse than the movie in question? So first up.
Okay. What now?
So Silverado, the movie that I believe is his first Western, better than or worse than Silverado?
I'm not a fan of Silverado. So this maybe I should have just said that from the beginning. So a lot of people might not. They don't need to listen to my opinion here.
Well, I think Silverado is fun if you want to see cowboys as like superheroes who are incapable of like astonishing, like larger than life deeds. But it definitely feels like middle-aged men playing cowboys and Indians like they did when they were children. But it's not all the things that I want from a Western from someone like Anthony Mann or Sam Peckinpah are totally absent from a movie like Silverado. But it is, it will pass the time. I think for me, Silverado is probably more entertaining than Horizon. It's definitely shorter.
Yeah, it's very much the movie equivalent of like one of those novelty photos, those sepia novelty photos that you get like at Knott's Berry Farm or the fair or whatever.
Totally. I've got one of those with my fifth grade girlfriend. Yeah, we posed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah. Okay, yeah, Kevin Kline, that's a real tough gunfighter. Okay, we'll go along with that. So Silverado, not a favorite of mine. So I think it's probably entertaining overall. I might have to say Silverado, but the stuff I like about this movie, I like better than probably anything in Silverado, outside of maybe that opening scene. So
right.
this movie's more mine than Silverado.
Okay,
but
fair enough. Well, moving on to the next one.
Okay.
Better than or worse than the following? Famously, Dances with Wolves, winning Costner 7 Oscars in March of 1991. And once again, I will never forgive it for taking a lot of Oscars from Goodfellas, but better than or worse than Dances with Wolves?
Worse than. I'd say worse than. I don't love Dances with Wolves. Maybe I have to revisit it, but it's never been a favorite of mine. But it's just even on a level of just the texture of it, just the feel of it. Dances with Wolves feels like a real movie. There's sections of this that feels like some parts felt like a movie you'd see at a museum or something, or like especially some of those early scenes. The cinematography is not amazing. I think the
cinematography is perfunctory at best, whereas with Dances with Wolves, that early scene when he's riding in front of the rebel forces and letting them all take shots at him, and he's basically doing this, his Christ figure routine, inviting them to end his life then and there. But at least it's shot in a beautiful cinematic fashion. And I keep saying cinematic. For me, cinematic is when you tell a story with pictures instead of with words. And that's the domain of television. And everything about this movie feels like a made-for-TV movie, but a made-for-TV movie in the 80s and 90s before shows like The Sopranos and Deadwood raised our estimation of what TV could be. This whole movie feels like a big, giant, glossy miniseries from the late 80s, early 90s. And that's not necessarily a good thing for selling tickets.
Yeah, yeah. Except in that scene in that little town with Costner and the girl. But I think the cinematographer was right. Isn't it the guy? It's J something Murrow
I'll
something.
tell you. Let me hang on. I've got the
He directed Street Trash, I think.
really. Hang on. I've
I
got
could be wrong. Didn't he become a cinematographer?
so Horizon is shot by J. Michael Muro, but Dances with Wolves, hang on, was shot by do 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 do. Dances with Wolves is shot by Dean Semler.
Yeah, there's a difference. But I think J. Michael Muro, didn't he do Street Trash or something? Didn't he direct Street Trash? You know Street Trash, right?
I've seen Street Trash, but I don't know the cast and crew. I'm looking it up right now. So Street Trash was directed by J. Michael Muro. You're correct.
Yes. So, I mean, if you get him to shoot a Western, I guess. But, I mean, there's a lot of good shots and things in the movie. Some of it looks very nice. But it's like, it costs so much and everything, but it's like, not because in any particular scene it looks like that's on the screen. It's just because so much had to be done in all these different storylines. So it's just like, it's like the Golden Corral buffet of Western movies. Just not high. None of it's high quality, but there's a lot of it.
It's like going to Cheesecake Factory. Cheesecake Factory famously has a big menu with a lot of stuff on it, but none of it's particularly good. It's just like it's just. I guess the selling point is you can eat anything you like as long as you don't necessarily want it to be prepared that well. But getting back to better than, worse than, moving on to the next option: better than or worse than the following.
Tell me about the reward, Wyatt.
You'd be doing me a favor if you would call me either Wyatt or Herb. Not both.
All right. Wyatt.
Wyatt Earp from 1994, a movie where I was so ignorant and stupid when I went to see it in the theater. I didn't know that Wyatt Earp was a real guy. And so as the movie got into the section that resembled scenes that I remembered from Tombstone, which came out the previous year, I got really confused.
You're like, I guess Wyatt Earp's in the public domain now.
Yeah, my stepdad had to kind of explain things to me after the fact. But 1994, Wyatt Earp, the big, giant Lawrence Kasdan sweeping epic. Horizon, better than or worse than Wyatt Earp?
Worse than. I don't think Wyatt Earp really works as a story. It has a lot of really bad things in it, but I've got a place in my heart for Wyatt Earp. You know, I think there are aspects of it that get the closest to history, and so in that respect, I enjoy it. I like his characterization. I like his portrayal of Earp. I think and I like Dennis Quaid's portrayal of Doc Holliday. I think they're the closest historically. Not as fun as Val Kilmer. I think that Kevin Costner makes a better Wyatt Earp than Kurt Russell did. So yeah, I have a place in my heart for Wyatt Earp.
All
so
right.
I gotta get to that.
All right. So last compare and contrast: better than or worse than?
You the one killed our friend?
That's right. I shot the boy too, and I enjoyed it.
Open Range from 2003, directed by Kevin Costner and co-starring the legendary Robert Duvall, aka Gus McCrae from Lonesome Dove.
Yeah, this is worse than. Open Range is it's okay. I think that it had the potential to be something bigger and better than what it was. Not bigger necessarily, not bigger. Let's not say bigger. But I think it had the potential to be better than what it was. There's just the sagging midsection. It's just a lot about it that's just not that interesting, and the weak villains hurt it a lot. But yeah, it's a smaller, more simply told story. It has a great gunfight at the end. You leave the movie feeling satisfied, you know. And so yeah, I'd have to, and you know, and it really was, and maybe yeah, I think it probably still is. You know, the best gunfight in a Western, you know, um, for decades, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, it's
That's
really
an
one of the
excellent
best.
question. I mean, the most obvious answer is the climax to The Wild Bunch, but that obviously was 1969. But in the 21st century, there haven't been a lot of great shootouts. I guess even though the movie is, I mean, it's hard to even categorize it as a Western because it's so in the realm of Quentin Tarantino's own imagination, but there is a good shootout initially when the character played by Leonardo DiCaprio gets shot. And then
Yeah.
Christopher Waltz says, I couldn't resist. He gets mowed down. And then suddenly Jamie Foxx is in the middle of a giant shootout as a shootout that's seen as expertly staged.
Yeah. That's a lot of fun. Just the huge, Paul Verhoeven's size squibs and everything. So that one is that one's a lot of fun. But Open Range is it's definitely better than this. I think. Yeah, I know you said this is the last one, and even though I don't love it, I think that the Kevin Costner Western, or at least Western adjacent thing that works the best overall is probably the Hatfields and the McCoys.
Oh, which I've never even seen. I don't even know if I've even heard of it. What is that, a TV movie or what is that?
Yeah, it was like a TV miniseries, and it was directed by Kevin Reynolds.
Gotcha. And Kevin Reynolds, who directed Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Yes, and Waterworld.
Oh, well, anyway, I know a lot of. I know Cable Guy likes Waterworld. It's like, I don't know what the big deal was. I saw it 6 times. It ruled. I don't like Waterworld at all. What I like even less is The Postman. I know people keep saying, "Oh, The Postman." It's like a Western sci-fi movie. I'm like, yeah, but it still sucks ass. I remember I went to see Jackie Brown in the theater. It was sold out. Wasn't a ticket left. I was like, well, shit, I'm already here at the theater. I'm seeing something. So I bought a ticket to see The Postman. And I was in the mood for, an homage to blaxploitation from the 1970s or the world of Elmer Leonard. And what I got instead was another Kevin Costner vanity project. And The Postman, I do not consider myself a fan.
I've never seen it. My best friend loves it. He's not a movie buff though, but I think he's probably just seen it on TNT, on the afternoon, taking up probably 4 hours of space with commercials.
And I think that's got Will Patton in it as well. Hang on. So I haven't seen it in 25 years. Yeah, Will Patton plays the villain in it. So at least it shows that Kevin Costner is very loyal to his friends and collaborators, and he will continue to use them for years on end. But yeah, here is Will Patton 25 years later popping up in Horizon. Yeah,
I think there are a lot of people in this are in the Hatfields and the McCoys.
Okay.
And I honestly can't remember. But it's Kevin Costner and Bill Paxton, and they're each the patriarchs of their respective families, Hatfields and the McCoys. Powers Booth is in it and everything. It's a mini series. It doesn't need to be as long as it is. It's not amazing. It's not going to blow your mind. But I remember enjoying it. I remember thinking it was pretty decent. So for me, and I guess everybody take all this with a grain of salt. If you're like a big Costner fan, big Costner Western fan, a big Tom Selleck Western kind of fan, Louis L'Amour sort of guy, then you might like this. Just know that it's, it doesn't have an ending, and it's really long.
Reminds me of the kind of novels that are written by Holly Martins and The Third Man. Everybody keeps making fun of the fact that he writes Westerns, how he's like a scribbler who drinks too much. But he's one of those guys where he just writes these kind of like dime store novelettes that people can kind of pick up and put down anytime without too much investment. They pass the time. They're lightly entertaining, but they're not like a big meal the way something like Mrs. Miller or Shane or any of the big classic Westerns like Stagecoach are. Like after you watch Stagecoach, when you get to the end of it, you're like, can we just start it over and watch the whole thing again? Like it's that enjoyable and that rich and that exciting. And at the end of Horizon, as soon as it got into that montage of things to come without actually any ending of any kind, to this 3-hour bloated monstrosity, I just sat there gobsmacked or dumbfounded. I was like, I cannot fucking believe you are ending this movie this way. Like, you're not the MCU. And also that whole gimmick of like teasers for the next movie. It's like, I'm just so over that gimmick. Like, give me a kick-ass 3-hour movie, and I will gladly show up for chapter 2, 3, and 4. And because I have a YouTube channel devoted to movies, obviously I'm going to come back for 2, 3, and 4. But I have a very hard time like calling my dad and be like, oh my God, Dad, you got to head out and see Horizon. It fucking rules, because I know my dad's been watching Westerns since like the late 50s. He's got standards. He's got, he's got tastes and preferences. I can't realistically tell anybody that they should see Horizon unless they're just fascinated by the behind the scenes endeavor, which leads me to my last question. Is this going to end up being like the Heaven's Gate of the 21st century? And for people who don't know, like, Heaven's Gate in the early 80s was a famous runaway production, went wildly over budget. It was released, and then it was like, roundly rejected, released in truncated form, and slowly but surely it's accumulated a dedicated fan base over the years. But if you read the book Final Cut by Stephen Bach, it tells you all the trials and tribulations about the behind the scenes and how it just got so out of hand. Are we looking at a potential embarrassing failure for Kevin Costner, or is this going to be a situation where he gets the last laugh? He's like, look, I'm the risk taker. I'm the gambler. I'm the one who believes they have a story to tell. Like, are he and Francis Ford Coppola going to be the heroes of 2024 for going out on a limb and risking their life and reputations and their basically their financial independence by making these giant vanity projects?
I mean, despite everything I've said here, I am rooting for him. Whether or not this is going to hurt the Western, I mean, sure. For me, I don't.
But the Western's already dead. You can't even hurt it. I mean, I love Westerns, but the genre it's over. So it's like you cannot.
Yeah. So
you
is
cannot
it going to
do
be the
additional
Heaven's
damage.
Gate? I mean, was Heaven's Gate even the Heaven's Gate of Westerns? You know what I mean? It's So I'm rooting for him. And despite everything I said, I'm going to see the next one. I want to see the next one. There was a lot about this movie that I enjoyed. There is a certain level that I can enjoy almost any Western on. But right. Even if it is to critique it, at least I'm entertaining myself in some capacity, But there was enough strong stuff here, or at least stuff that I thought had potential, that it's just disappointing that it's like he overextended himself. I think he overextended his budget, his talent, the talent of his co-writers. His co-writer is some John Baird or something. There's no other credits, which is whatever, fine. And then the other one is I got a story by Mark Kasdan, Lawrence Kasdan's brother, who I think co-wrote Silverado. But it's just like I don't see anything he has to say, and I don't know what he's trying to say, and maybe he's going to say it in the next one. But it's a lot to expect out of people.
But what it reminds me of, I remember when 1999 rolled around and a little movie called The Phantom Menace came out. And I know there are plenty of people who are half my age like, I love The Phantom Menace. Fine, enjoy it. The movie sucks ass. But I remember at the time people saying, why are you being so harsh in The Phantom Menace? It's all the setup. It's all the setup for like the Clone Wars. And once we get to the Clone Wars, it's going to be amazing. And then what happened? Attack of the Clones came along. It was even worse than The Phantom Menace. And so there is a chance that part 2 might be a fucking huge failure. Like in an ideal world, all the stories will converge. They'll all start interacting, and it'll become one movie as opposed to a bunch of separate movies. And I think that's what desperately needs to happen to make it feel like a cohesive story. But there's always the chance that Horizon Part 2, people say, oh, well, it's just a setup for Part 3. Like, be patient. I'm like, anyway, I feel like if you invest a few hours into any story, whether you're reading it or watching it, it needs to pay some dividends. And I don't think this movie has paid any dividends yet.
Yeah, no, it hasn't. And it is one of those things where you don't want to be a naysayer. You have a respect. I'm pulling for Costner. I wasn't, I have a certain amount of skepticism going into this. I know I've never fully loved any of Costner's Westerns.
What about his non-Westerns? What do you think of the Untouchables and JFK and No Way Out and stuff like that?
I think JFK is probably interesting. No, I don't know if I've ever actually watched No Way Out. The Untouchables
what about
I find absurd.
The Clint Eastwood movie? What's it? Perfect World, when he's on the road.
No, I've never seen that one. I've never seen it. So I'm not a Kevin Costner diehard.
That might be Kevin Costner's best performance. And it's not a Western, but it kind of feels Western adjacent in a lot of ways, and has a lot of that Clint Eastwood flavor. Obviously, Clint Eastwood directed it. So yeah, you might enjoy that one.
Yeah, I've been interested in seeing it, but there's a lot of a lot of things to see. But so yeah, yeah, I don't want to be one of the people that it's like, come on, dude, do it this way or whatever, or try to but and I respect that he's going out on a limb for his vision. I just don't. So far, he hasn't shown me that his vision is worth it, and that's unfortunate. And I don't want to come out here shooting him down. I mean, nothing would be better than a big Western coming out. I mean, that might be cool. I don't know. I don't need any more Westerns.
You can give him credit for the 90s resurrection of the Western. Like the fact that Walter Hill and Sam Raimi and Clint Eastwood and all these different filmmakers were all making Westerns in the 90s. I feel like the catalyst for that was the success of Dances with Wolves. So even if the Western's quote unquote dead, if somebody came out and made $1 billion of a Western, well, guess what? The movie business loves to copy success. We would see a shitload of Westerns get made, and that would potentially lead to some good ones coming out of the process. So nothing would make me happier than for this movie to become a wild success. Apparently, Kevin Costner believes that, like in Elvis country or Middle America, however you want to describe the regions between Los Angeles and New York, it's teeming with fans who are willing to go to Walmart and buy this on DVD. But as we both heard on that podcast, The Town, DVD sales account for less than 1% of all revenues related to movies these days. It's not some giant, like, untapped market. 20 years ago, you could actually make a commercial disaster in the theater that would more than make up for its money on DVD and Blu-ray, because people would just buy the movie instead of even renting it. And so it just made movies much more commercially viable. It's just a much more uphill battle these days. And so I'm going to be rooting for it and following it every step of the way. But what I won't do is lie to people and say that it's some great classic Western, because we got movies like Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid coming out on Blu-ray next week, which is a good Western. And if someone wants to see what is a movie with style and vision and ambition and extraordinary actors and incredible writers and just awesome atmosphere and awe-inspiring music, like Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid will blow people's fucking minds. And so, yeah.
And that's also a mess, you know?
Yeah.
But
and that movie was it's a total train wreck in so many ways, and you can't take your eyes off of it, and you can watch it 10, 15, 20, 25 times.
I think, this is what I think, is that Kevin Costner was in a place where, because of that show, he has a certain audience. And the thing is, when I was looking up, theaters to see it yesterday, when I was at work, a lot of them were pretty full, hours in advance. And when I went and saw it, it was a full theater. I think, and I'm Southern California, whatever, it's Temecula area, so still, but so I think he has an audience. And here's the thing, is that if this movie was open range, I think it would be doing really well. I don't know how it's doing. I don't know. I haven't checked any of that stuff. But if that was this movie, something smaller that ends on a high point with a big gunfight or whatever, I think this movie would be doing really well. It would afford him the ability to make this further stuff. He's testing his audience. These people are coming out here, because of the show, because of and he's like trying their patience. I don't know. I can't. I find it hard to believe that anyone would come out of this. I'm coming out of it wanting to see the next one, I guess. So that's cool. But I can't imagine anyone coming out of this going, "Yeah, you have to rush and see it. It's amazing." Like, it feels like.
Do you think the whole genesis of this, or the whole reason he made this, is out of some strange rivalry? I'm blanking on the name of the showrunner for Yellowstone, but it's feeling like
Taylor Sheridan.
Yeah, Taylor Sheridan. But it's almost feeling like he's like, I can do this better than you can. Step back and watch what I'm going to do when I'm free from the burden of you telling me what to do. And I don't know if it's going to work, but it's almost like he's saying, like, it was Yellowstone a success because of Kevin Costner, or is Yellowstone a success because of Taylor Sheridan? And I have a feeling they argued about that across all 5 seasons.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think, well, I don't know, I don't follow all that stuff, but I did try to watch. I haven't watched Yellowstone,
I've
so
seen the
I
first
can't.
4 seasons and the season 5 premiere, so I'm almost finished with it, but I'm not obsessed, but I enjoy it. But I remember I was at a bar in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was just eating dinner by myself, and I could hear the bartender basically offering a full synopsis for each and every single episode and season to a couple girls at the bar, basically making it sound like The Sopranos and Deadwood and Game of Thrones all rolled into one. I was like, wow, like there's some people
Yeah.
out there who really fucking love Yellowstone and like, you know, hang upon every word and love the lore and the history and the background. Like people are so invested. But once again, is that Taylor Sheridan or Kevin Costner? I would argue is probably Taylor Sheridan because he's a writer, actor, performer who basically he fell in love with Lonesome Dove, but the book and the show back in the 1980s, he's like, I want to be that guy who tells those kinds of stories. And he's been more or less successful at building his own television empire.
Yeah, well, my parents love it. I tried to watch the 1883 show. I got about 3 episodes in. It was fine. I didn't like hate it. I had a lot of the same issues. I think in a lot of ways, it has stuff that it's. I think it's overall less embarrassing in many respects than this. But it's not good. At least I didn't think so. I don't know where it went from there, but I'm like, this is too much of a commitment. It's not interesting enough. I don't need to commit to this just because it's a Western. And so I don't know about Taylor Sheridan. I think he might be spreading himself a little thin too. I think maybe he
I don't
needs
know when
to.
he sleeps. I mean, and also when you look at his shows, it doesn't look like he has a huge writing staff. Like when you look at the episodes of Yellowstone, episode written by Taylor Sheridan, it's not like he's got a writing staff of 20 guys who are sharing the duties. He's more or less writing all of it. And so the dude is just a fucking machine. Like love him or feel indifferent toward him, but there's no denying he's not afraid of a little hard work.
Well, I saw stuff like Sicario, and then what was the
There's Wind
what's the
River, there's Hell and High Water. Like I like
yeah,
his
that's
work in his shows.
and those are all like enjoyable to a certain degree. And it's like, oh man, this would be great if this guy maybe he could tackle the Western genre. And then 1883, no. And then once he produced that Bass Reeves show or something, I got about an episode into that. It's like, nah, he doesn't have it.
Shot. But yeah, so at least you're giving him a chance. Yeah, I didn't see any of 1883, 1923, or Bass Reeves. I saw the first 2 episodes of Tulsa King. And like I said, I watched a lot of Yellowstone, but I think that has more to do with my fixation on Kelly Riley than anything else. But that's another subject for another day.
Yeah, I guess so. But anyway, so like, I mean, I'm rooting for the movie, and in certain ways, I want to see Kevin's vision, and I did think there was a lot about it that I thought was really fun and really cool. And like I was saying, if it was just a smaller thing, I mean, it's like when Westerns come out and they're not embarrassing. And Westerns, there's a lot of Westerns that get pumped out, straight to video stuff and everything.
Viggo Mortensen just had one.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I need to check it out. But, and then something that is as simple and straightforward like Old Henry with Tim Blake Nelson, I don't think it's fine. You know what I mean? It's whatever. It's a 6.5 on a 10, maybe a 7, maybe 6.5. But people love it, and they really hold it in high regard. And it's because they're starved for just like a simple, straightforward, Western that knows its budget and tells its story simply and keeps those ambitions. I don't want to tell an artist to keep your ambitions in check, but at the same time, like, if you don't have it, you don't have it. And Kevin Costner, I don't think, has it to try to tell this big scope of a story. He has certain talents as a director and as an actor that this movie utilizes in fits and starts, but just has a ton of his weaknesses just packed around it.
Well, just to end things on a high note or a positive note, I'll say, as just like a palate cleanser or counter programming, like the big studios these days are running scared and they're consolidating and they're shrinking. And I think we're doomed to 5 to 10 more years of sequels, prequels, reboots, remakes, etc., where nobody breaks any new ground, nobody tells any new stories. It's like, what are IPs that were popular in the past, and how can we shake the cobwebs off and try to make them live and breathe again so our studio can survive for a few more years? At a minimum, this is a new story, not a good story, but it's a new story. And I respect and admire the hell out of Kevin Costner for taking on this giant challenge. He quite literally is like grabbing the bull by the horns and wrestling with it. So I think for anybody out there who never wants to see another movie by Pixar or Marvel or like, modern day interpretations of Star Trek or Lord of the Rings or any of this bullshit ever fucking again, at a minimum, they can go see Horizon. Like, thank you. Something fucking different from all the bullshit that's being cranked out on a regular basis, like on an assembly line by Disney. So I do think it's the counterpoint, or it's the opposite end of like kind of the movie going spectrum from that. But there are 100 other Westerns that I would recommend people see before this. Like if you're just sitting at home and you got a little time, I can give you a long list of recommendations. I'm not going to recommend anybody. I wouldn't even when it comes to Kevin Costner's oeuvre, Horizon is probably going to get recommended last of all of them.
Here's what if you're interested in seeing it, look up the time that it starts, put on the tall T, watch that, then walk into the movie. Kevin Costner is probably showing up around that time. Watch those scenes, go to the restroom, go outside, smoke some pot or something. Just watch the scenes when he's in it. You might enjoy yourself.
That's fair. And the good news is you'll have seen the tall T in the process, which is awesome. Tall T,
yeah.
So fucking good. And speaking of Tall T, which stars Randolph Scott, I've got one final clip which mentions Randolph Scott.
Just give me 24 hours to come up with a brilliant idea to save our town. Just 24 hours. That's all I ask. No! You do it for Randolph Scott.
Randolph Scott.
All right, Sheriff. 24 hours.
Yeah, so I think a double feature of the Tall T and Blazing Saddles, your time will be much better spent than seeing Horizon. But if you believe in the movie biz and you believe in the history of filmmakers risking, like, I've said it too many times at this point, but I just have to say it one last time, that spirit of risk taking and launching a huge creative endeavor, which might destroy your professional life. I feel like the movie industry for 100 years was built on those kind of risk takers, like the original studio heads, like Jack Warner and all those guys 1,000 years ago. They were gamblers, they were risk takers, and they loved the movies. And I think even if I don't like Horizon, I think Kevin Costner loves the Western and loves movies. And so I have a hard time, being that critical, because I want to see 100 other people out there replicating that same spirit. And I feel like if there were 100 other filmmakers out there who were willing to take those same risks with their career, the movie industry would be in a much better place. So I applaud Horizon, the spirit of it. I just don't, I cannot say that it's a better movie than any of my favorite Westerns.
Yeah, well, I respect what it meant to do, but
it's
I don't
not what
care
you did
what
do. It's what no, it's not what you meant to do. It's what you did do. I don't like.
It's what he did that I don't like.
Yeah, that's the clip I should have uploaded in advance. For people who don't know, we're talking about the beginning of the Wild Bunch, right before all hell breaks loose, and William Holden says, "If they move, kill them." It's a line that Sam Peckinpah's father used to tell him when he was a little kid. It's not what you did. It's not what you meant to do. It's what you did do. I don't like, and it's the first line of the movie.
I don't care what you meant. Yeah,
the temperance. Yeah,
I don't care what you meant. It's what you did that I don't like. Yeah.
Oh, it's so fucking good. Yeah. Watch the Wild Bunch.
But
you can't go wrong.
But I do care what he meant to do, and I respect it. I'll be there opening day for the next one. Even if you don't do one of these for the next one, I'll still go see it.
I'll do it totally.
Okay.
I run a YouTube channel devoted to film culture, but like a huge part of film culture is my love and affection for the Western. And I get so precious few opportunities to discuss Westerns on this channel. I'm dying to tackle each and every single installment, but I should also once again remind people, we are going to be doing the deep dive on Pat Garrett and Bill the Kid, which is responsible for David and I first meeting in the first place. You were looking for podcasts about that movie, and I'd done one with my high school roommate, whereupon we did a big episode about, all the Billy the Kid movies that you like, but we didn't really get to do the deep dive on Pat Garrett. So this new Blu-ray, which has all these different versions and all these different supplementary materials. It'll finally give us our opportunity to do a proper deep dive on Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. And so I'm very, very fired up to do that video whenever it works for you. Whenever you feel like you've had a chance to digest everything on that Blu-ray, just say the time and we will do it.
Oh yeah, I'm ready. And also, everyone also remember, as you said on the last on your last one about this, I am a Western snob. Take everything I say with a grain of salt, you know. But yeah, I mean, I guess check it out. But there are better Westerns to see. If you want to see a big epic, a wagon train epic, check out the Covered Wagon. And there's actually
John Ford, which you and I tackled one time on Wrong Reel. Wagon Master, I feel like, is a great wagon train movie.
Yes, yeah. There's actually a great video that I think the guy's name on Twitter is Silent Movie Gifts or something, but he has a Twitter channel and he just did a thing about the Covered Wagon.
Okay.
Which was like considered for the longest time like the best movie ever made, and it was kind of like the first Western film that was like an epic. It's the first of this type of movie, and it was huge for years. And John Ford's The Iron Horse was Fox wanted their version. They put it in, real quickly. There was another one from the cinematographer called North of 36, which is now not available. I was able to see it quickly. I talk about it on the Pink Smoke podcast on the Cattle Drive Westerns. But if you want to see big epic Westerns, you can check this one out, but I would also say check out the Covered Wagon, check out the Iron Horse, check out the Big Trail, check out even Cimarron. There are Westerns that tell these similar stories, these big epic stories, and they do it.
Anthony Mann's entire run of like 7 or 8 Westerns, you will feel like you've invested the same amount of time as you would have invested in Horizon, but you'll have seen several really good movies in the process. And he does cover the entire Western experience by virtue of doing a bunch of standalone movies that are more or less successful in what they're trying to achieve.
Exactly. Or like when we talked about Winchester 73, which I said is, very much like a sampler plate of the Western genre, because the device of the gun allows you to have a revenge tale, a cavalry movie, a bank robbery story, a Comanche attack or whatever tribe is in that movie. But basically you get the trading post. You get almost every kind of Western story outside of like The Prospector or something. But that's a movie that follows all these different stories, but it has a through line and it's told efficiently in an hour and a half, So there are better Westerns in this movie, but I wouldn't hate you if you saw it. Go see it, but watch other Westerns too.
Totally. Well, where can people find you online if they want to see some of your artwork depicting beautiful naked ladies? Where can people hunt you down to see some of your history of the West, compare and contrast between some movies that do it well, some movies that don't do it so well, and also obviously all your kind of historical primary sources that you're comparing with? But now it's the time to plug and promote anything and everything related to David Lambert.
For my artwork, you want to go to David Lambert Art on Patreon. For my Western stuff, you want to go to David Lambert Art on Twitter. And so, like I said, there's some of it's like essays. We'll go through history and some of my own opinions, probably more articulate than now. But a lot of it's just really fun things about Western comic books, Western history there, what's accurate, what isn't accurate. And I think it's always done in a way that is entertaining, but also, there's a lot of information there, and I don't think it's done in a dry way. I think my Twitter is a great resource. If you like that,
I like it.
I think it's great.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap this sucker up. Hope you enjoyed our conversation. We hope you didn't take, I guess, people are getting butthurt about criticisms for the movie because they are rooting for it. But it's like, you cannot take leave of your senses. Even if you want a movie to be good, we have to wrestle with the movie that we have, not the movie that we wanted it to be. And I think if people listen to some of the podcasts that I've linked down in the description below, they'll see that all of our criticisms come from a good place, because you and I love the Western genre dearly and will continue to watch Western movies for the rest of our lives. But if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to be notified about future videos. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.
He's looking at you, kid.
I'm Charles Foster Kane! Hey, Stella! Suck on this.
Oh.